Reed was coming home late. The sun had gone down hours ago, and the sky was dark and full of stars. His boots were muddy from a long day of work, and his back ached in that deep, tired way it always did at the end of a hard week. He just wanted to get inside, eat something warm, and sleep. The path home cut along the edge of the great forest, the same path he had walked 100 times without anything strange ever happening. That night was different. He heard it before he saw it. A small sound. Barely anything at all. Just a thin, broken noise coming from the tall grass near the tree line, like something was trying very hard to cry but did not have the strength left to do it properly. Reed slowed down. He told himself it was probably just the wind moving through the grass, or a bird settling in for the night. He almost kept walking. Almost. But the sound came again. He stopped and turned toward it. The grass was tall and dark, and he could not see anything at first. He pushed a few stalks aside with his hand and crouched down low. That was when he saw it. Curled in the dirt, pressed flat against the cold ground, was a drake hatchling. Tiny. Smaller than Reed had ever imagined a drake could be. Its scales were a pale gray color, and they were dull in the way that skin gets when something has been cold for too long. One of its wings was bent at a wrong angle, folded beneath it in a way that looked painful. Its eyes were half open and glassy, and it was shaking. Not the fast kind of shaking that meant fear. The slow, deep kind that meant the cold had already been working on it for hours. Reed sat back on his heels and looked at it for a long moment. He knew what drakes were. Everyone in the valley knew. The great forest to the east belonged to them, and the rule that every person in the valley grew up knowing was simple. You did not go into the forest. You did not bother the drakes. And if you ever saw one, you walked the other way and did not look back. That was the agreement, unspoken but understood, that had kept the valley peaceful for as long as anyone could remember. Reed looked at the hatchling shaking in the dirt. He did not walk away. He reached out slowly, moving his hand in a low, careful arc so that the little creature could see it coming. The hatchling flinched but did not have the strength to move back. Reed let his hand rest on the ground just beside it for a moment, not touching, just letting the warmth of his skin sit close. The hatchling blinked at his hand. Its shaking did not stop, but something in its eyes shifted, just slightly, from blank fear to something more like waiting. Reed pulled off his coat. It was his good coat, thick wool, worn soft over many years. He spread it open on the ground and then, as gently as he had ever done anything in his life, he slid his hands under the hatchling and lifted it. The little creature made a sharp, pained sound when the bent wing shifted. Reed went still immediately, murmuring something low and shapeless, just sound, just warmth in his voice, until the hatchling settled again. Then he laid it carefully in the center of the coat and folded the sides up around it like a bundle. He looked at the bent wing. It was not broken through the skin, but it was sitting wrong, folded under at an angle that would only get worse if it stayed that way. Reed reached into his shirt and tore a long strip from the bottom hem. He worked slowly, talking the whole time in a low, steady voice, the same way he talked to his horses when they were frightened or hurt. He did not say anything useful. He just talked. About the weather. About the mud on the road. About how the stars looked different in winter than they did in summer. He folded the strip of cloth into a soft support and tucked it gently beneath the bent wing, holding it in a better position without forcing anything. The hatchling watched him the entire time. When Reed was done, he sat back against the fallen log behind him and settled the bundled coat across his lap with the hatchling inside it. He reached into his pack and found the bread he had not finished at midday. He broke off a small piece and held it out near the hatchling's nose. For a long moment nothing happened. Then a small tongue came out and touched the bread. Then a small bite. Then another. Reed kept breaking off pieces, small ones, patient ones, until the bread was gone. The night got colder. Reed pulled the edges of the coat tighter around Pip and leaned back against the log. He could feel the little body against his chest, still shaking but slower now, steadier. The hatchling's eyes were growing heavy. Reed kept talking, low and even, just enough sound to fill the silence and give the little creature something calm to hold on to in the dark. He did not sleep. Every time his eyes began to drop, he straightened up and blinked himself back to the cold air and the dark trees and the small warm weight pressed against him. He was not going to fall asleep and let the hatchling wake up alone in the cold. That was not something he was willing to do. By the time the first pale light began to show at the edge of the sky, Pip was breathing slowly and deeply, fast asleep, tucked against Reed's chest like the cold night had never happened at all. Reed sat very still and watched the sky lighten and did not move. The night was very quiet. There was no wind. No rain. Just the cold, still dark of the forest edge and the soft sound of Reed's voice moving through it like something small and steady. He was not saying anything important. He was just talking. About the farm. About the old fence post he had finally fixed that afternoon. About the way the eastern field looked in early morning when the frost was still on the grass and the light came in sideways and turned everything silver. He talked because silence felt wrong, and because the little creature in his arms was still shaking, and because he did not know what else to do. Pip's eyes were open. They were pale gold, those eyes, catching what little starlight came through the trees and holding it. The hatchling was not looking at the forest or the sky. It was looking at Reed's face. Just watching him talk, the way a very young thing watches something it does not fully understand but has decided, for reasons of its own, to trust. Reed noticed and kept his voice even. He reached into his pack a second time and found the last of his bread. It was hard and a little dry, not the kind of thing he would normally bother finishing, but he broke it into the smallest pieces he could manage and held them out one at a time near Pip's nose. The hatchling ate slowly. Carefully. Each small piece taken with a delicacy that surprised Reed, like the little creature understood that the food was being shared and did not want to take more than its share. When the bread was gone, Pip licked Reed's fingers once, a quick, shy touch, and then tucked its nose back against the fold of the coat. Reed smiled at that. He could not help it. He turned his face away so the expression would not seem like anything threatening and just let himself smile at the dark for a moment before settling back against the log. The cold was serious now. It had that heavy, pressing quality that came in the deepest part of the night, when the ground had given up all the warmth it had stored from the day and there was nothing left between a person and the raw temperature of the sky. Reed could feel it in his fingers and along his arms where the coat was gone. He ignored it. He shifted Pip a little higher against his chest, where the warmth of his body was strongest, and tucked the coat edges more firmly around the little one's back and sides. Pip made a sound. It was very small. A low, soft sound, somewhere between a hum and a rumble, the kind of sound that had no sharp edges to it at all. Reed went still for a moment, not sure what it meant, not sure if he had done something wrong. But Pip did not pull away. Instead the hatchling pressed closer, turning its small head so that one of its ears, a flat, ridged thing just behind the jaw, was resting directly against Reed's chest. Against his heartbeat. Reed understood then. He had seen young animals do the same thing. Lambs that had lost their mothers. Foals born in cold weather. They pressed toward warmth and sound because warmth and sound meant alive, and alive meant safe. It was the oldest kind of comfort there was, and it did not need words or understanding to work. It just needed to be there. Reed sat very still and let his heart do what hearts do. After a while the shaking slowed. It did not stop all at once. It faded the way a storm fades, gradually, in stages, with small tremors still moving through Pip's sides now and then before those two grew quiet. The pale gold eyes blinked. Blinked again. Grew heavy. Pip's small body rose and fell with each breath, and each breath came a little slower than the one before it. Reed kept talking. He had moved on from the farm by then. He was talking about the valley, about how it looked from the high ridge on a clear day, about the way the river caught the light in summer and the way the whole forest turned gold in the weeks before winter. He described things he had not thought about in years, small things, the color of the stones in the creek bed, the sound the wind made in the tall pines at the north end of the property, the way his old dog used to sleep in the exact center of whatever room he was in, taking up as much space as a dog 3 times his size. He did not know if Pip understood any of it. He did not think it mattered. The sound was the thing. The steady, calm, unbroken sound of a voice that was not frightened and was not going anywhere. Pip's eyes closed. Not all the way at first. They drooped and then held, drooped a little further and held again, the way eyes do when something is fighting sleep and losing badly. Reed watched it happen and felt something settle in his own chest, something that had been tight since he first heard that small, broken sound in the grass. Then Pip's eyes closed fully. The little body went soft and heavy and warm against Reed's chest. The breathing deepened, grew slow and even, in and out in a long, peaceful rhythm that Reed matched without meaning to, his own breath slowing to keep time with the hatchlings. He looked up at the sky. The stars were still out, but the deep black of midnight had softened at the edges. Somewhere far off, behind the hills to the east, the dark was turning. Not light yet. Not close to light. But the promise of it, faint and patient, spreading slowly toward the valley. Reed looked back down at Pip sleeping against his chest. He settled in and waited for morning. Ash had not slept. He had been awake since the first hour of the night, when the clan's youngest scout came to him with wide eyes and a voice that could not quite stay steady. Pip was gone. The scout had checked the sleeping grounds twice before coming to Ash, hoping he was wrong, hoping the hatchling had just moved to a different spot the way young ones sometimes did. But Pip was gone, and the trail of small tracks led toward the western edge of the forest, toward the place where the trees thinned out and the open farmland began. Ash had stood very still when he heard that. Then he had moved. He sent scouts in every direction but led the western search himself. He was old, Ash. Older than most of the clan could remember, his scales a deep, weathered gray, the color of stone that has sat in a riverbed for a very long time. He was not the fastest drake in the clan. He had not been the fastest for many years. But he knew the forest better than anyone, and he knew what it meant when a hatchling's tracks went toward the human side. He knew what dangers lived out there. The clan fanned out through the trees in silence. No one called out. No one made noise. They moved the way drakes moved when something serious was happening, low and careful and completely focused. Ash moved with them, reading the ground, reading the air, following the faint trace of Pip's scent through the dark. It was a small scent. Young and light, easy to lose. Ash did not lose it. He followed it to the tree line. There the scent changed. There was something else mixed into it now, something that made every drake behind Ash go tense without being told to. Human. The scent of a human was threaded through Pip's trail, right there at the edge of the grass, where the forest floor gave way to open ground. Ash stopped. The clan stopped behind him. He stood at the tree line for a long moment, not moving, reading everything the air was telling him. The human scent was not sharp. It did not carry the particular edge that came with excitement or aggression or fear. It was calm. Tired, even. And Pip's scent was not frightened. That was the thing that made Ash pause. He had expected to smell fear in the hatchling's trail, the sharp, acrid scent that young drakes gave off when they were in danger. There was none. Pip's scent was simply there, quiet and settled, mixed with the human smell in a way that made no sense to Ash at all. He stepped out of the trees. The sky was just beginning to lighten, the darkness pulling back from the hills in slow, gray stages. The grass was heavy with cold and wet, and it soaked Ash's legs as he moved through it. The clan followed, spreading out in a wide, silent line behind him, every head low, every eye moving. Then Ash saw them. He stopped so suddenly that the drake behind him nearly walked into his flank. He did not notice. He stood completely still in the wet grass and looked at what was in front of him, and for a long moment he did not breathe. A human was sitting against a fallen log at the edge of the field. He was young, broad-shouldered, his chin dropped toward his chest in the heavy, genuine sleep of someone who had been awake a very long time and had finally lost the fight. His arms were folded across his chest. And there, tucked against him, wrapped in the folds of a thick coat that was clearly not meant for a drake but had been made to work as one, was Pip. Sleeping. Pip was sleeping the deep, loose sleep of a hatchling that felt completely safe. The pale gold scales caught the first thin light of dawn and gave it back softly. The small chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. The bent wing, the one Ash had been sick with worry about since the scout told him about the tracks, was supported carefully beneath a folded strip of cloth, held in a better position than Ash could have managed quickly in the dark. The human had done that. Ash looked at the cloth. He looked at the coat wrapped around Pip. He looked at the human's arms, still curved around the hatchling even in sleep, and at the human's shirt, which had a long tear along the bottom hem where the cloth strips had come from. He stood there and looked at all of it. Behind him the clan was absolutely silent. Not the tense silence of drakes ready to act. Something different. Something quieter than that. Ash could feel it without turning around, the way the whole line of them had gone still in a way that had nothing to do with threat or strategy. They were looking at the same thing he was looking at. A scout shifted in the grass. Ash turned his head slightly and the scout went still again. The light was growing. Pale gold now along the tops of the hills, spreading down slowly toward the valley floor. A bird began to call somewhere in the trees behind them, the first bird of the morning, its voice small and clear in all that quiet. Pip stirred slightly in the human's arms. Just a small movement, a shift of the head, a deeper breath. The human's arms tightened a little without the human waking, just a reflex, just the body doing what it had been doing all night. Keeping the hatchling close. Keeping the hatchling warm. Ash looked at this human sleeping in the cold without his coat and said nothing for a very long time. Reed woke slowly. It was the light that did it, the pale gold of early morning pressing through his eyelids in a way the dark had not. He became aware of things one at a time, the way a person does when they have not slept enough. The cold in his arms and shoulders. The wet grass soaking through his trousers. The stiff ache in his back from sitting against the log all night. The small warm weight still pressed against his chest, still breathing slow and even. Then he became aware of something else. He was not alone. Reed opened his eyes. For a moment he did not fully understand what he was seeing. His mind was still slow with tiredness, and the sight in front of him was so far from anything he had expected that it took several long seconds to come together into something real. Drakes. Dozens of them. Standing in a wide half-circle in the wet grass, all facing him, all completely still. Large ones and middle-sized ones and a few that were only a little bigger than Pip. Every eye was on him. Not one of them was moving. Not one of them made a sound. Reed did not scream. He did not know exactly why. Some part of him understood, even in the first shocked second, that if something bad was going to happen it would already be happening. The drakes were not moving toward him. They were not making any sound that felt like a threat. They were just standing there, watching him, in a silence so complete that he could hear the wet grass bending under his own weight as he straightened slowly against the log. Pip stirred at the movement. The hatchling made a small, sleepy sound and pressed its nose further into the fold of the coat without waking. Reed looked down at Pip for just a moment, then back up at the drakes. His heart was going very fast. He could feel it in his throat. But his hands stayed still, stayed gentle, stayed right where they had been all night. The largest drake stepped forward. Just one step. Then it stopped. It was enormous, this one, its scales the deep gray of old stone, its eyes a pale, steady amber that caught the morning light and held it. It was old. Reed could see that clearly. Old and heavy with it, the way certain things are that have been in the world a very long time. It looked at Reed with those pale eyes and Reed looked back at it and neither of them moved. Reed spoke first. He did not plan to. The words just came, quiet and direct, the same way he had talked through the whole night, without performance, without any attempt to sound like anything other than what he was. He said he had been walking home when he heard a sound in the grass. He said he found Pip hurt and cold and shaking, and that the wing was sitting at a wrong angle so he had tried to support it as best he could. He said he had not known what else to do except stay, so he had stayed. He said he was sorry if he had done something wrong. He said he just could not leave something that small and hurt alone in the cold. He stopped talking. The large drake looked at him. Those amber eyes moved from Reed's face down to Pip, still sleeping in the coat, then to the strips of cloth supporting the bent wing, then to Reed's shirt where the cloth had come from, then back up to Reed's face. Reed waited. He was not sure he was breathing. Then the large drake moved. Not fast. Every movement was slow and deliberate, each step placed with care, the great head lowering as it came closer. Reed made himself stay still. He made his hands stay where they were, resting on either side of Pip, and he kept his eyes on the drake's face and tried very hard to look like someone who was not frightened, even though every part of him was telling him very loudly that he was a great deal smaller than the thing walking toward him. The drake stopped close. Close enough that Reed could feel the heat of it, a deep, steady warmth that radiated off the gray scales like stones that had been sitting in the sun. The great head came down until it was level with Pip, and then the drake opened its mouth slightly and breathed. It was not fire. Nothing like fire. It was just a long, warm breath, slow and even, that moved over the sleeping hatchling like a wave of summer air. Pip stirred. The small body shifted. A tiny claw tightened in the fabric of Reed's shirt. Then the pale gold eyes opened, blinking slowly against the morning light. Pip looked up at the gray drake above and then made a sound that Reed had not heard before. Short and bright and unmistakably happy, the kind of sound that needed no translation at all. Then Pip looked up at Reed. And made the same sound again. Reed let out a breath he had been holding for a very long time. The large drake straightened slowly and looked at Reed over the top of Pip's head. The rest of the clan had not moved. The whole field was still quiet, just the birds now and the soft sound of the wind beginning to pick up as the morning came properly in. Reed looked at the drake and the drake looked at Reed and Pip lay between them making small, content sounds and showing no interest in moving from where it was. Reed did not know what came next. But the drake's eyes had changed. The careful, measuring look was still there, but something else had moved into it. Something that Reed, even with no knowledge of drakes and no experience with anything like this, could not quite mistake for anything other than what it was. The field was very quiet. The morning light had grown stronger now, spreading across the wet grass in long, flat rays that turned everything gold and soft. Reed sat against the log with Pip still warm against his chest and the great gray drake standing over them both, and he did not know what was going to happen next. He was not sure anyone did. The clan stood in their wide half-circle behind Ash and nobody moved and nobody spoke and the whole world seemed to be waiting for something. Ash looked at Reed for a long time. Not the way an animal looks at something. Not blank or empty. There was something working behind those pale amber eyes, something slow and deep, like a decision being turned over and examined from every side before it was made. Reed sat still under that gaze and did not look away. He did not know if looking away would be the wrong thing to do. He just knew that meeting those eyes felt more honest than dropping them, and honesty was the only thing he had to offer. Pip reached up with one small claw and touched Reed's chin. It was a tiny gesture, barely anything. Just the tips of those small claws resting against his jaw for a moment. Reed glanced down and Pip looked back up at him with those pale gold eyes, wide awake now, calm and certain in the uncomplicated way that very young things are certain about the things they have decided. Reed felt something tighten in his chest. He looked back up at Ash. Ash had seen it. The elder Drake was still for another long moment. Then something shifted in his expression, subtle but real, like the surface of deep water when something moves far below. He drew himself up slowly to his full height, and Reed had a single breathless second of not knowing, of his heart stopping in his chest. Then Ash lowered his head. Not the careful, measured lowering he had done before when he breathed over Pip. This was different. This was slow and deliberate and complete, the great gray head coming all the way down until it was level with the ground, the long neck curved, every line of the enormous body folded into something that Reed, even without any knowledge of Drake custom or Drake history, understood immediately and completely. It was a bow. Reed did not move. He could not move. He sat against the log in the wet grass with Pip in his arms and watched the most ancient thing he had ever seen bow its head to him and felt the breath go out of him entirely. Behind Ash the clan had gone even more still, if that was possible. Reed heard a sound from somewhere in that half-circle, low and soft, not distress, more like the sound a crowd makes when something happens that nobody expected but everyone recognizes as important. Ash straightened slowly. He held Reed's gaze for one more moment. Then he looked down at the ground between them and did something Reed did not understand at first. A movement along the elder's side, barely visible, and then a single scale fell. It landed in the grass at Reed's feet without a sound. Reed looked down at it. It was gold. Not the pale gold of Pip's scales. Deeper than that. A rich, true gold, the color of firelight or old metal or the last light before sunset. It was the size of Reed's palm, smooth on one side and ridged on the other, and even lying in the wet grass it seemed to hold its own warmth, as if the cold could not quite touch it. Reed looked up at Ash. The elder Drake watched him. Waiting. Reed reached out and picked up the scale with both hands, carefully, the way he would pick up something he understood to be fragile even if it clearly was not. It was warm. Warmer than the morning air had any right to make it, warm in the way that living things are warm, from the inside out. He held it in both hands and looked at it for a long moment. He did not know what it meant exactly. He had no way of knowing. No one had told him anything about Drake custom or what a gold scale from a clan elder signified or what weight it carried in the world the Drakes lived in. He was a farmer who had found a hurt hatchling in the grass and stayed with it through the cold because he had not been able to think of any other decent thing to do. But he knew it mattered. He could feel that without being told. The same way he could feel when a storm was coming before the clouds arrived, or when an animal was in real pain versus ordinary distress. Something in the weight of the moment, in the stillness of the clan behind Ash, in the way the elder's eyes rested on him now, told Reed clearly and without words that what he was holding was not a small thing. He closed both hands around it gently. Pip made a soft sound against his chest and Reed looked down. The hatchling was watching him with those pale gold eyes, fully awake, perfectly calm, one small claw still curled loosely in the fabric of his shirt. Reed looked at Pip for a moment, then back up at Ash. He nodded. He did not know if Drakes understood that gesture. But it was what he had. A single, honest nod, his hands still closed around the warm gold scale, his eyes steady on the elder's face. It was the only way he had to say what he meant, which was simply that he understood the weight of what had been given, and that he would not treat it carelessly. Ash looked at him for one final moment. Then the elder turned, slow and unhurried, and walked back toward the tree line. The clan moved with him, parting around Ash and then flowing together again behind him like water, silent and steady and sure. One by one they disappeared into the shadow of the trees until the field was empty and quiet and Reed was alone in the wet grass with the morning light coming in strong and warm. He sat for a long time without moving. Pip finally climbed up his chest with small, careful steps and settled on his shoulder, looking out at the empty field with him. Reed lifted one hand and rested it gently against the hatchling's side, feeling the small, steady heartbeat there. In his other hand the gold scale stayed warm.